Hi everybody, I'm Frank Davis and welcome to New Year's Eve at Jackson Brewery. And of course we have New Year's Eve at the center, at New Orleans Center. We have New Year's Eve in the street. We have New Year's Eve all over the Crescent City right now. And if you thought the 80s was special, wait till you see what you look at when you glance back on those the past 10 years that we've lived here in the beautiful Crescent City. We're going to bring you the next hour and a half of the entire recap. But right now, while the party's going on up here, there's also a party going on down on the street. Frank Turner's down there. Frank, what's happening at your end?
Hey, Frank, let me tell you, it's a big party down here, and Happy New Year to you again. You can hear it going on. Ever since they closed off Decatur Street about half an hour ago, about the last time I talked to you, Frank, it looks more like a giant party room down here than a city street. Of course, there are people here from all over the country, especially Sugar Bowl fans, who are about to take over the place. And we've noticed that the Alabama folks are outnumbering the Hurricane fans about 2 to 1. They're all going to be cheering the game, of course, tomorrow, but tonight they're cheering the new year. Happy New Year, all right? Hey, that's Decatur Street, Frank. You know it. Back to you.
You don't look like you're having a good time down there, Frank. I want you to have more fun, okay?
We'll try to have more fun for you, Frank.
We're going to have fun for about an hour and a half. But you know, the party that's here at Jackson, the party that Frank's attending down on the street, very, very ad-lib type party, there's also a special event going on at the New Orleans Center. Tom Foreman's over there. Let's check in with Tom. Tom?
Thank you, Frank. We appreciate you checking in here. You know, I couldn't understand a word Frank said on the street. I got to tell you, Frank, I've been where you've been, and Frank, I've been where you've been. And frankly, Frank and Frank, I wouldn't trade either one of them for where I am tonight. This is the New Orleans Center, and there are thousands of people gathered here for what is the New Year's party. Everybody's gathered here to help out multiple sclerosis by participating in the Clue Caper and various other games all evening. People here tonight are competing for some great prizes, including round trip to Switzerland for a week. They've got some other awards like getaway weekends, 3-night packages to other places, strands of pearls, everything that people are competing for, and all for a good cause. They're going to help out multiple sclerosis. As you can see here right now, it's spread out over several floors as people participate in the treasure hunt part of the evening, but there are thousands of people here. The band is playing downstairs, and dancing will pick up later on, and I'm telling you, this is the party and the place to be on New Year's Eve night. So we're going to be partying here right up until midnight, and we hope you'll check in with us. We hope you all have fun where you are, but we're having a great time over here at New Orleans Center. Back to you, Frank.
Tom, you wouldn't happen to have an extra Eskimo suit and mucklucks, would you? Because the temperature up here is rather brisk.
Well, you know, Frank, actually, no, I don't have that. On the other hand, I'm nearly to break into a sweat here because it's so nice and warm inside as opposed to where you are, Frank.
It is brisk out tonight. Now, the temperature, of course, I'm not Dave Barnes and the rest of the crew, but it's about 45, 50 degrees. That doesn't mean anything. Girls, don't put on just your strapless dresses and come out here. The wind chill factor is pretty brisk up here on top of the Jack's Brewery, so bundle up nice and warm. The antifreezing is going to help, I promise you. We've tried some of that earlier. We're going to come back in just a few minutes and take you through the entire decade. Don't go away. I'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Connie Salika, and I just put up my last holiday decoration. I know it's unusual, but this red ribbon is a very important decoration. Mothers Against Drunk Driving is asking us to change the meaning of tying one on. As a symbol of your commitment not to drink and drive, tie a red ribbon to any visible spot on your car. Join thousands in making these holidays happier by making them safer. Have a wonderful holiday and tie one on for safety.
Ooh, that feels nice. It's me, the 1990 Brian Prism. Hop in. Start up my fuel-injected engine. Try my power steering, overdrive, my AC, and my rear window defogger. Don't be shy. I only cost $89.95.
Yes, sir. Well, oh, she's flirting again. Here at Brian, our good deals speak for themselves.
Brian Chevrolet, 8200 Airline.
It's the U.S. Hot Rod Motorsports doubleheader. The Ford Budweiser Truck Bowl Championships and the Camel, Mud, and Monster Truck Racing Championships exploding into the Superdome January 13th. Blowing Hot Rod 4x4 side-by-side monster truck racing, plus a new breed of supercharged funny cars down in the mud bog. That's not all. See Forian, the jet dragster that transforms into a 2-story tall, flame-throwing robot. Tickets now. The Superdome box office and all Ticketmaster outlets. Saturday, January 13th in the Superdome. Superdome.
There you see it, folks. You're looking at the clock. 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 37, 36, 35 seconds. You know, in that amount of time, we're going to bring a close to an entire decade. And, of course, when you bring a close to one decade, you have to welcome a brand new one. Like any 10 years, there's been a number of events that have occurred in the Crescent City and elsewhere that have caused personalities to form. Now, as we get rid and we usher out, or any kind of way you want to say it, as we wave bye-bye to a chunk of time we've known as the 80s, we are going to look back and find out what those events were. Garland and Angela will tell you what the entire last decade is all about. Stay with us.
Thank you, Frank. In just an hour and a half, the decade of the 80s will be over.
But it will certainly not be forgotten. The 80s could well turn out to be one of the most significant periods in our local history.
We saw a lot of good and bad happen here and around the state. Tonight, before the decade slips away, we'll look back on the images of those events and how they shaped our lives.
We begin this 80s farewell with a roller coaster ride that took us from boom to bust. The decade started with great promise. In 1980, Louisiana was attracting more new residents than at any time since the end of World War II. Unemployment was 6.7%, the lowest it had been in 10 years.
The amount is $4,220,000 and the per acre figure is $840.
The boom was on, and the reason was oil. The price of a barrel of crude oil was $21.59 in 1980, nearly double the price of 1979, and 7 times higher than in 1970, and it was still climbing.
This is very responsive to our attempt to increase domestic production of energy in order to be less reliant on foreign sources.
By 1981, oil was averaging nearly $32 a barrel. It was during this period that the most massive building program in Metro New Orleans history began moving from the drawing boards and into reality. Oil and other energy companies needed office space. More hotels were needed to house visitors to the upcoming World's Fair. Housing for the growing population began to replace trees in St. Tammany and marsh on the West Bank. Major shopping malls followed the population. The rapid growth dramatically changed the New Orleans skyline between the beginning of the decade and now. The contrast is evident in the Central Business District, along the riverfront, and in Metairie. Unfortunately, at the same time many of these projects were going up, the price of oil was going down. International demand for oil was decreasing. Yet OPEC kept pumping huge amounts of oil into the market. The result was good for consumers, but bad for oil-producing states. The drop in price was gradual at first, $2 or $3 a year. Then in 1986, the oil plummeted from just over $24 a barrel to less than $13. The impact was devastating.
That's the worst I've seen it. Well, that's the worst I've seen it since 1938. We've had to do some things that we did not like to do. A lot of people suffering.
Oil-related jobs disappeared as quickly as they came, and so did the people that held them. Without the cushion the oil industry had provided, the metropolitan area experienced the recession that began in the rest of the country several years earlier.
We caught a lot of smart people with their pants down, and it just, that's the bottom line.
Major manufacturing jobs began to disappear. American Standard closed its rebuilt plant and transferred manufacturing to Brazil, where labor was cheaper.
I'm sure it's going to be a shock to everyone, because this is your bread and butter.
Kaiser Aluminum put hundreds out of work when it shut down its unprofitable Chalmette plant.
Sad day for people in St. Bernard to get such drastic news.
More than 300 became unemployed in 1983 when Good Hope Refinery closed its troubled gates.
Of course, I have seen all of our employees that are very concerned about what is going to happen, especially with today's economy.
The Port of New Orleans began losing business to modern, competitive ports in other Gulf Coast cities. And the shuttle disaster in 1986 led to layoffs from Martin Marietta.
It's going to wait, pray that it'll be okay in the future.
1980 would be the only year in the decade where statewide unemployment would be below the national average. By 1986, Louisiana joblessness was the highest in the country.
It's getting very where a person can't find a job in this town. That's why people are leaving New Orleans. Hey, man, you don't need no help washing cars, do you?
The ripple effect began. Housing values fell as more homes were put on the market. Construction trades suffered. State and local governments that depended on the money from oil taxes began to shrink, and taxpayers were asked to make up the difference.
All those cuts, you're going to have to raise up $300–400 million in revenue.
Consumers had less money to spend. Many locally owned retail operations found they could not keep going. Krieger's, Gus Meyer, and Godshaw's closed forever. Maison Blanche and D.H. Holmes, the oldest department store in the South, sold to out-of-town interest. Gaping holes were left in what was once the city's premier shopping street. But this decade still ends on a hopeful note. Oil prices have come back up and are holding at a level oil companies say are satisfactory to sustain production. The 1984 World's Fair ended $100 million in debt and forced many small business people into bankruptcy, but it left a valuable legacy. The convention center and hotels built to accommodate the fair are now important elements of the city's increasingly tourist and convention-based economy. The fair sparked development of the riverfront. Outdated wharfs are being replaced by retail marketplaces, parks, and the aquarium. The recovery has been slow and stumbling. Avondale shipyards won major contracts for a diversity of projects, from Navy ships to floating power plants. But other jobs were lost as oil companies continued to consolidate operations in other cities.
It occurs to me that these are the very people that we're not replacing with people coming in from out of town.
In the case of two competitors, Martin was a good one, but Boeing was better.
New big payroll high-tech industries have eluded the city. When NASA decided in 1987 to base a multi-billion-dollar space station project in Huntsville, Alabama, rather than New Orleans, it was a major psychological setback.
A lot more suffering, a lot more waiting, a lot more time to climb out.
The general consensus is no white knight will arrive to renew the economic boom of the early 80s. The metropolitan area's future growth will have to come from existing businesses. The state in the fall of 1989 perhaps took its best step toward reviving the economy. Voters approved gasoline taxes to improve vital transportation projects. Among the projects are expansion of New Orleans International Airport, modernization of uptown docks, and upgrading of roadways critical to commercial use. The economic roller coaster of the 80s taught a lesson. The 90s will show what was learned. One good thing that's come from the economic downturn is renewed community involvement. In the late 80s, many people who wanted to stay and prosper in this area realized they would have to take action to save the life they have here. They joined groups such as the Business Council, the Young Leadership Council, Metropolitan Area Committee, the Chamber, and many other organizations. Their actions helped improve accounting procedures at City Hall, gave public school students extra incentives, and even helped save the symphony.
In a moment, we'll take you back to 1980 to follow the evolution of one of Louisiana's favorite pastimes.
Channel 4 salutes partnerships in education.
C&G Producing Company is committed to improving the quality of life in New Orleans. That's why we have an active partnership with McMain Magnet School. We provided a computer lab, academic awards, and organized an after-school tutoring program. We also offer many grants for elective classes such as creative writing.
Business working for education. It's building a better Louisiana.
Politics was always the topic of conversation at the dinner table when I was growing up.
What does it take to be the best newsroom in the nation?
There are decisions being made today that will affect people in Louisiana well into the next century.
The National Edward R. Murrow Award.
Journalism is about recording history as it happens, and what a fascinating time in the history of Louisiana politics.
Louisiana's news leader is now America's news leader.
It's Soundtrack's biggest sale of the year. Demo and clearance items at the best prices of the decade. But it's one day only, tomorrow at Soundtrack.
Lincoln, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you're looking for an executive position. Yeah, but what about the college?
Well, I've done a lot of reading and studying, sort of on my own.
I know you're a smart guy. You know you're a smart guy. You ain't going nowhere without that sheepskin, fella.
Discover CLEP, the college-level examination program. CLEP tests can earn you college credit for what you know.
You're not really what we call executive material. We'll call if you get something.
Ask about CLEP at your local college or job. Make learning pay.
3 guys running for mayor, and they all wear the same kind of glasses. You notice that? The same pair. And these are supposed to be visionary men.
Feelings instead of my wallet. That's what I say.
And the nuns really made a very big impression on me, and I'd like to show it to you right here. No.
We've got the laughter on Angela. Weekdays at 4 on Channel 4.
State agencies and local governments used to think of the state capitol as a money machine. But shortly after 1980, the machine began to break down. And as Bill Elder tells us, no one seemed to know how to fix it.
Louisiana politicians will look back at the decade of the 80s as not a very good time to be in public office. They had to deal with a collapsing economy, an unresponsive revenue system, and growing public distrust.
The 80s did not start off that badly for politicians.
This is a momentous occasion for me.
When Dave Treen became the first Republican governor since Reconstruction, he was able to make a popular move. A surplus of state funds allowed him to reduce income taxes. But within just 2 years, state revenues began to feel the effect of the drop in oil prices and a national recession.
We may have to make some cuts here or there.
In 1982, Treen proposed a $450 million tax on oil and gas piped across Louisiana wetlands.
Bridges across the river, very expensive highway programs. We're getting into the years now where it's going to require big, big dollars to finance these things to completion.
Failure of the bill pointed up a serious problem for Treen. He seemed to lack the political savvy to get his programs through the Democratic-controlled legislature, and it left the door open for the return of the flamboyant Edwin Edwards. The popular former two-term governor easily won the primary election in 1983. He tried to use the vote as a mandate to ram through a billion-dollar tax package.
I'm not going to take the position that if you adopt 2/3 of these measures that we're going to accept it and go on. It just won't work.
The legislature agreed to $722 million in new taxes, the largest increase in the state's history. But it didn't stop the bleeding. A year later, oil revenues were down another $250 million, and the cost of government continued to climb, even though no new services were added.
The problem is not because you don't have enough money coming in. The problem is that you're spending too much money.
A blue ribbon committee appointed by Edwards reported that the state's tax structure was seriously flawed. They recommended less dependence on sales and business taxes, more reliance on property and income taxes. Edwards acknowledged the problems, but before he could act on them, he became involved in the battle of his life.
They told me I was a witness, a subject, and a target. And it doesn't matter what they call you. If they find some justifiable reason for doing something to you, that's what they'll do.
Edwards and 6 business associates were indicted on federal racketeering charges in the winter of 1985.
If we weren't confident we could convict all the defendants, we would not have asked for the indictment.
The federal prosecutors had already been successful in a number of cases involving state and local officials. Among those sent to jail for wrongdoing were former Agriculture Commissioner Gil Dozier, Senate President Michael O'Keefe, and Charles Romer, Edwards' former Commissioner of Administration, who got caught in the Brilab scam with reputed mafia boss Carlos Marcello.
I don't cry and I don't sigh. This will be over with by and by.
Edwards maintained a glib demeanor and was eventually acquitted after 2 long trials.
Freedom. You don't know what it means till somebody with power tries to take it away from you.
But his political future was severely damaged. Federal prosecutors revealed that Edwards used his influence to make millions for himself and his friends, and that while governor, he used suitcases full of cash to pay off Las Vegas gambling debts. All of it happening at a time when the state was sliding into a deep depression. For the remaining 2 years of his term, Edwards had only one plan for pulling the state out of financial problems. He proposed widespread casino gambling as well as a lottery.
I am not advocating gambling. I advocate the business of gambling.
The legislature refused to go along. It produced its own stopgap measures, the main one being a lifting of the sales tax exemption on food and drugs. Edwards was no longer providing leadership. In his bid for re-election in 1987, he faced 4 strong challengers.
Tell him on Saturday, don't mess with my tutu.
It looks like we're going to make it, and I feel good.
He ran second in the primary to North Louisiana Congressman Buddy Romer, a long shot who surged to the front in the final 2 weeks before the primary ended. Then, Edwards dropped a bombshell.
And I have determined that under the circumstances, since I did not run first, that it would be inappropriate for me to continue this election.
I just talked to the governor on the telephone and told him how pleased I was and surprised.
Romer was the winner even though he had only 33% of the popular vote. Not an overwhelming mandate for the difficult task ahead. But his victory was a reflection of the tide of conservatism and reform that was creeping into Louisiana government. Romer's campaign platform was that Louisiana needed better management of its huge budget, not new taxes. He started forcefully, calling the shots even before his swearing in.
Thus, my letter to the governor this morning, asking that I be appointed, as of his directive, as the interim commissioner of administration, working under his responsibility, but being on the inside.
As governor of the state of Louisiana.
As governor of the state of Louisiana.
After his inauguration, he persuaded a special session of the legislature to give him extraordinary powers to deal with the budget deficit through cutbacks.
We want to improve service and reduce spending by utilizing private services where possible.
During the regular session, he pushed through a major education package, but his attempts to restructure the state's flawed tax system were unsuccessful.
I am deeply disappointed that we didn't achieve this final victory.
In the spring of 1989, voters rejected a mega amendment that would shift some of the tax burden from corporations to individuals. It was thought that Romer's power may have been seriously eroded by the laws, but he was able to come back in the fall with a substantial win. Voters approved a hike in the gasoline tax to fund transportation improvements and also agreed to lift the limits on revenue from license plates. But for now, the state is still haunted by an unstable tax structure. Budget problems at the state level directly impacted New Orleans government. Two administrations have struggled to make ends meet with reduced assistance from the state.
The various units in city government are at the point now where further reductions will seriously impact their ability to deliver the services required.
For the first 5.5 years of the 1980s, Dutch Commerials proposed several revenue measures. The most controversial was to tax the earnings of everyone working in the city, even if they lived in other parishes.
It is the only alternative that generates an adequate amount of revenue to stabilize our city's finances.
Voters overwhelmingly rejected the idea. They also rejected Commerials' attempts to change the city charter to allow him to serve more than 2 terms in office.
Many of the people that voted for him 8 years ago for mayor are the same people that don't believe anyone should be mayor for longer than 8 years.
I give you the next mayor of New Orleans, Sidney Bartholomew.
Sidney Bartholomew inherited the budget problems in 1986. He reduced the number of employees on the payroll and increased miscellaneous fees to keep the city operating.
We must therefore recommend new and additional sources of revenues and service charges.
But a permanent solution was elusive. Politicians at all levels were working under a handicap of public mistrust. Some voters were accustomed to winking at government shenanigans when they thought someone else was paying the bills. Now, many began to flinch when governments spend millions of dollars to buy canal bottoms and pay consultants who are campaign contributors, or when governments appear to selectively enforce the collection of sales or property taxes already on the books. The 1980s saw the beginnings of reforms aimed at increasing voter confidence. New laws are on the books to limit campaign contributions and thereby attempt to limit the influence of contributors.
The beginning of an economic turnaround have begun to show itself in the past few months, somewhat easing the pressure on politicians. But the question now is, will they find the resolve to correct the problems which have placed Louisiana in its worst financial shape since the Great Depression?
Hard times and dissatisfaction with government can sometimes lead to unexpected developments. That was the case earlier this year when former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, was elected to the Louisiana legislature. With barely more than 50% of the vote, Duke won a seat in the House of Representatives from a conservative, mostly white district in Metairie. Duke's victory drew national attention. He was denounced by the National Republican Party, which he joined only months before the election.
The 80s saw the retirement of 2 important public figures. Powerful U.S. Senator Russell Long retired in 1987. The son of Huey Long spent nearly 40 years in Congress. And Archbishop Philip Hannon, who led the Archdiocese of New Orleans for 23 years, retired in 1989. The Pope appointed Archbishop Francis Schulte as his replacement.
Coming up next, to look at some of our worst nightmares that became reality.
Living where we do, as we do, we sometimes fall victim to climate, man-made devices, or our own failings.
And the results can be catastrophic, as has happened all too many times over the last 10 years.
The decade of the 80s was one of fire, ice, and water. Water had the biggest effect on the most people. The rains that are supposed to come only once every 100 years visited the area 3 times in just this decade.
We just hope and pray for the best, that's all I can say.
Each one a little heavier than the one before, always dumping more than the pumps were designed to handle.
The rain was so intense that it was greater than the pumping capacity.
It's bad.
And it's washing the water into her house.
In some cases, the floods were testimonials for uncontrolled growth. There was also the flood that wasn't caused by rain. It came from a small hurricane named Juan. Juan lingered over the coast for days and pushed tides all the way into Lincolnshire and Westminster subdivisions on the West Bank.
Everything totally gone, man. Everything gone.
It was a startling realization of how close the Gulf of Mexico is to our doorstep. Once in 1983, there was warning that the water was coming. St. Tammany Parish residents were able to stack sandbags around their property as the North Shore rivers began to rise. Sometimes the sandbags kept the water out, sometimes the water won.
One of our pumps is out, and the water's coming in, and it's all over the house, and we just don't seem able to keep up with it.
While the torrential rains and hurricanes did the most property damage, the most devastating storms lasted only a few seconds. That's how long it took for a tornado to rip through a Laplace subdivision in December 1983.
I have a solid door in the front of my house, and it just blew in the house.
And there was glass swirling. The glass was swirling in the house.
25 people were injured and 95 homes were turned to splinters. A more disastrous storm sprung up on a July afternoon in 1982 at the eastern end of runway 10 at New Orleans International Airport. Sudden downward burst of wind smashed Pan Am Flight 759 into a Kenner neighborhood. 154 people were killed.
I tried to get people out the house, too, on my block. Anything was happening. I tried to tell everybody to get off the block.
Rain was not the only extreme this decade. Unusually dry summer heat waves took a toll on the elderly and the ill.
What kind of cancer does he have? Do we know?
4 winters saw the temperature move drastically to the other end of the scale. Businesses and schools closed in January '82 as thermometers plummeted. New Orleans' largely uninsulated water pipes went pop. 1983 brought the coldest December on record. The most crippling freeze came in January 1985. It wasn't so much the temperature as it was the timing. A critical piece of equipment froze at a Nopsey electric plant. At the same time, other Nopsey plants were down for routine maintenance. 200,000 customers lost electricity, some for up to 16 hours.
We picked up and left. We locked it all up.
The Siberian Express returned in December '89, bringing snow and ice to Metro New Orleans just 3 days before Christmas. Along with the natural disasters came the dangers of living in an industrial corridor. The decade was a little more than 6 months old when a freighter and container ship collided in the Mississippi River Gulf outlet. 12.5 tons of toxic pentachlorophenol spilled into the channel.
What could be the long-term effects of people who eat fish who have accumulated not only the PCP but some of the dioxins?
The outlet was blocked for days as the chemical was vacuumed from the water. Tests showed no lasting ecological damage. In 1982, 43 tank cars carrying toxic chemicals derailed and exploded near Livingston, Louisiana.
Evacuated the area, please do so as soon as possible.
2,700 people were forced out of their homes for 2 weeks.
Bird testified she was driving the train because engineer Edward Robertson was drunk.
It took months to clean up the chemicals that spilled into the ground along the tracks. Another spill left metropolitan area residents with a bad taste in their mouths. An estimated 21 tons of phenol were dumped into the Mississippi River by a Georgia Pacific plant near Baton Rouge. The chemical spread through area water systems before it was discovered. It lingered in lines for nearly a week. The incident led to the creation of a river monitoring network and a new awareness of river pollution problems. While river pollution often passed undetected, other industrial problems were obvious. Explosions and fires seemed to be a regular thing at the former Good Hope refinery in St. Charles Parish until the plant closed in January 1983. A major blast rocked Tenneco in September 1983, killing one worker and forcing the evacuation of residents near the plant. And the 1988 explosion at Shell's Narco plant killed 7 people and damaged buildings for miles around.
Oh, look at this, what happened. I didn't...
Human error is the factor most cited for the cause of accidents. It was at work on a November night in 1980. A gasoline tank truck driver tried to beat a train through a crossing in Kenner. The driver escaped the flames that took the lives of 7 people who were in buildings and cars near the tracks.
You're going to have to evacuate, sir.
A burning tanker car in 1987 caused considerable concern, not only because it threatened to explode and take a Gentilly neighborhood with it, but...
Miss Lawrence? Yeah, I know. Try to get out. You get in?
But also because it caught fire just 2 days before the arrival of Pope John Paul II. The fire was extinguished only hours before the Pope's plane landed. There were other fires that will forever be burned into our memories of this decade. The old American Standard plant and more than 350 jobs were lost in a fire in July 1980.
They couldn't get to the door to open the door up, and they couldn't kick the door down.
A January 1988 fire in a Desire Project apartment killed 5 members of a family and led to a housing authority management shakeup.
For your own safety, please step back.
The sad part is we were trying to preserve it.
And the whole city watched in horror as the historic Cabildo burned in May 1988.
It hurts a lot.
I hope that 10 years from now we won't be able to look at the 90s that way.
We can definitely do without that. When we come back, we will look at some events of the 80s that played key roles in shaping our future.
This is the whole idea behind this. New Robitussin DM cough relief in single doses. Now, you can take it with you.
Most nighttime cold medicines have 25% alcohol, but you can get relief without the alcohol with new Robitussin Night Relief in cherry flavor for children and adults. All the relief without the alcohol.
This is instant coffee? I don't believe it.
That's what people have been saying in fine restaurants. But what would happen if you secretly switched Folgers Crystals for the fresh brewed coffee in your home? Let's listen.
It tastes absolutely like what we drink when it's fresh brewed.
When I found out, I was totally shocked. Mrs. Terry, I said, the coffee smells good. I'll be down in a second.
Folgers Crystals, so dark and rich. Why don't you try the switch?
She did it to me this time. She got me.
Well,
she got me.
The Value of an Education.
By Richard M. Blake. The key to success can only be obtained.
Maybe there aren't enough words to describe the true value of an education. But if you're a graduating high school senior, we'd like you to try, because it could win you a $10,000 college scholarship. Ask your English teacher for details on how you can share the dream.
A joint community project from your Coca-Cola bottler and Channel 4.
Each decade has events that stand out. Apart from the immediate economic or political impact they might have, these events play an important role in changing lifestyles and shaping the profile of the community.
For metropolitan New Orleans, the 80s were the decade of the big events. The decade started with drama on the high seas. Two New Orleans-based Episcopal priests became heroes with their participation in the Cuban boat lift. Fathers Joe Doss and Leo Frade carried 437 people to freedom aboard their chartered boat, God's Mercy. That ship and hundreds of others that formed the so-called Freedom Flotilla reunited thousands of Cubans with families and friends in New Orleans. The drama continued as the priest ran afoul of shifting federal laws. They were convicted of smuggling illegal aliens into the country. But that conviction was overturned by an appeals court.
A terrible mess that, thanks to God, has been solved.
In all, about 100,000 Cuban refugees entered the United States, and there were some long-term consequences. Among the refugees were thousands of common criminals. Authorities blamed them for increasing crime in the metropolitan New Orleans area.
Perpetrating armed robberies and burglaries in the city and around the area.
The Marielitos, as they were called, became big news again in 1987. They rioted and destroyed federal detention centers in Oakdale, Louisiana, and Atlanta, Georgia. Crime was already an issue in 1980, but one murder case touched off racial tensions in the community. Officer Gregory Newport was shot to death one November night as he patrolled his beat in Algiers. The days that followed were bloody. Detectives investigating Newport's killing themselves shot and killed a black man in the Fisher Housing Project, two black male suspects, and the girlfriend of one of the suspects. Police say they fired only in self-defense. The black community was outraged. Police Chief James Parsons had been hired to reform the image of the New Orleans Police Department, but in the furor over the shootings, he resigned. Local authorities found no evidence of wrongdoing by police, but a federal grand jury indicted 7 officers for conspiring to violate the civil rights of informants who were physically and mentally intimidated during interrogation. 3 officers were eventually convicted.
The message has been sent to the people of New Orleans that they have had a problem. They certainly had one in November of 1980.
6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. America's first space shuttle.
The April 1981 launch of the Space Shuttle Columbia marked the revival of America's and New Orleans' involvement in space. Martin Marietta was riding high. More shuttle launches meant more external fuel tanks had to be built at the Michoud facility.
Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Then optimism about the future in space was interrupted with shocking swiftness. 6 astronauts and a school teacher died in the explosion of the shuttle Challenger on January 28, 1986. It was more than 2.5 years before the shuttle flew again.
I'd like to stand up and do a couple of kicks. That's just the way I feel right now.
The 80s saw Metro New Orleans enter the nuclear age and the controversy over the cost of nuclear power. Waterford 3 and Grand Gulf 1 nuclear power plants both began generating electricity. Both were years behind schedule and billions of dollars over budget. The burden of paying for Waterford 3 was placed on Louisiana Power and Light customers. The cost of the Grand Gulf generator in Mississippi was divided among LP&L and New Orleans Public Service ratepayers, as well as utility customers in Mississippi and Arkansas.
At the beach, at Pontchartrain Beach, you'll have fun every day of the week.
The lights went out on a New Orleans lakefront landmark in the 80s. Thousands of families used to spend summer evenings at the Pontchartrain Beach amusement park. It's closing in 1983, ended a long tradition of lakefront amusement parks.
Well, nothing is forever.
You'll love the thrilling rides, laugh till you split your sides at Pontchartrain Beach.
But New Orleans got another amusement park, at least on a temporary basis. It was called the 1984 World's Fair.
I think it's wonderful. I've been here 28 times.
It's very nice, it really is.
While the fair was not a financial success, it was entertaining for the 7.5 million people who visited. It was also an important spark for hotel and warehouse district development. New Orleans has annually welcomed millions for Mardi Gras and has been the site of more Super Bowls than any other city. But two events in the late 80s gave New Orleans good reason to call itself the host city of the 80s.
Eyewitness News special coverage of the arrival of Pope John Paul II continues.
And at 9:18, we have the feeling that the moment we've been waiting for is close at hand.
Pope John Paul II arrived in one of the United States' most Catholic cities on Friday, September 11th, 1987.
Right behind the Pope, of course, is our own Archbishop Hannon, and this has got to be the thrill of a lifetime for him.
It was the beginning of one of the most memorable weekends of the decade. Thousands watched the pageantry and were enthralled. It was not only that the very personable, spiritual leader of nearly 1 billion people was in our city. It was also a feeling of accomplishment. Volunteers of all faiths worked together to stage one of the greatest events in the city's history, and had done so at the height of an economic depression.
From the Superdome, Campaign 88, the Republicans in New Orleans.
That same volunteer spirit pulled together to stage the Republican convention in 1988. While the nation and the world watched a smooth transition of power take place, they also got a good look at New Orleans.
I consider this a fact. It's a terrific convention city.
Major event of the decade brought a permanent change of lifestyle for thousands of area residents. No longer would they spend 2 hours a day and sometimes much more to travel 1.5 miles. The opening of this link between the East and West in 1988 had parallels to international developments in 1989. Only here, it was the people of the West who were freed. Their land would now be more valuable, their economy more prosperous. For most, the price of freedom was worth the cost.
The 1980s also saw a number of international developments that touched New Orleans area residents.
17 of the Haitians who are still in Paris prison elect to return to their home, saying their lives are worthless. When several months go by and no word is heard from the 17, we decide to find out for ourselves if their fears were valid.
So we came to Petit-Gouin, a city more than 300 years old, a city that dates back to colonial times, to find out how and why this odyssey began in the first place.
Cocaine is made from the coca plant, grown in South America.
This
This is Colombia, South America, the cocaine refining capital of the world. Most of the plants are produced in Bolivia and Peru, but virtually all the coke that fuels the American high is produced in laboratories right here.
Our journey to find Louisiana and Mississippi Marines has taken us literally all over the base in Beirut.
And we found one New Orleans Marine guarding the administration building in a bunker on top of the building. Corporal Herbert McKnight has been a Marine for 3.5 years and a machine gun team leader on this high-rise bunker for the last 2 months. To spare his mother and family from worry, Herbert didn't tell them he was going to Beirut until he arrived. He feels strongly about his job in this foreign land, but misses his large family a lot.
Everyone here reads your letters and understand what you're doing.
And as he watched more relatives and friends come into the picture, he felt for just a moment he was home. On this day, the shelling became stronger. The Marines went on Condition 1, or imminent attack. And we found ourselves hurrying off the base with the sounds of mortar and gunfire all around us.
Minutes into the ride, we hit a massive traffic jam. As we sat, mortars and machine gun fire once again surrounded us. Unbeknownst to us, less than a block away, the Lebanese army had begun to fight the Shiite Muslims. We were witness to a dying city gone mad. Our last hurdle was an army outpost where we were caught in a crossfire. Minutes after we broke free, never did the bombed-out buildings of Beirut look so good.
The heralding horn signaled the arrival of Governor Edwards and his 600 guests. It is the traditional welcome to the Palace of Palaces, the trademark of King Louis XIV.
You feel like a king now?
Very few commoners are welcome like that.
It is said that the French monarchy reached its zenith in Versailles. The same could be said for the Edwards entourage.
It is a reception that ends all receptions, an event that combines the political, the theatrical, and the historical. Some say with Edwin Edwards, there's really not much of a difference.
For the wife, 2 sons, and the father of hostage Steve Willett of Chupik, Louisiana, the wait here in Paris has been an agonizing one.
As the days keep, going, I get more confident every day, I guess. It may take a little longer than I expected, but I do hope, I think we will be getting them home soon.
Steve Willett and 38 other men who were hijacked aboard a TWA flight from Athens 17 days ago are free men tonight. An Air Force C-141 cargo plane brought them to freedom here at Rhine-Main Air Force Base. Even Vice President George Bush was on hand to welcome the men.
You endured this cruel and painful experience with courage. Your country is proud of you.
As the Vice President made that emotional speech here at Rhine-Main Airport, Steve Willett and the rest of the refugees stood by, glad to be back on friendly soil once again.
Africa, land of tribes and grass huts, of big buildings and busy people. But what sets it apart is this, the bush, the wild, primitive land that has existed just like this for hundreds, thousands of years. It is the bush that has brought us to Africa. It is here to Zimbabwe we have come to search for the great animals of this earth. The bush is their home, and the first feeling one gets is that somehow we are intruding.
The city is now in many places a ruin of shattered storefronts and cracked streets. All over town, dozens of tent communities have sprung up. So massive was the destruction, there are thousands who have nowhere else to go. They cook on open fires, they sleep on open ground. This is the neighborhood where many of these people came from. As you might guess, they didn't have much before. Now they have nothing.
In less than 9 years, he has been seen in person by more people than any other man in the history of the world. Indeed, this successor to the first apostle has himself become an apostle. Apostle to the frightened, apostle to the oppressed, apostle to the world.
During the course of the 10-day Festival of New Orleans Music in Ascona, Switzerland, more than 30 groups and individuals who specialize in New Orleans-style blues, jazz, Dixieland, and gospel perform.
One of the favorites here in Ascona each year is Lillian Boutte, a traditional homegrown New Orleans artist who has enjoyed popular success here in Europe for several years now.
Just hear me, the June night, the moonlight, and you.
She says European fans are, for the most part, serious students of the New Orleans sound.
Here they are.
Without this, no Louisiana father would have taught his son the tradition of duck hunting. Without this, billions of dollars in revenue would never have been realized. This is Canada, but in Canada, there are problems. This is the infamous BR-364. In the 1970s, the Brazilian government built this road with the express purpose of developing the Amazon. But thus far, the dream has not come true. When workers first arrived, rainforest, as far as the eye could see. But today, in many places, this is the Amazon.
There was another major development that happened gradually over the decade. It could determine whether Louisiana will be a fit place to live in the years to come.
And that development is a growing awareness of our environment. For years, people who were considered radicals warned we were fouling our land, air, and water beyond repair. Louisiana's first official reaction to the problem came with the creation of the Department of Environmental Quality. Since then, we've seen increased monitoring and controls on chemicals dumped into our rivers. State officials standing up and saying no to a garbage barge, a train full of waste, and the dumping of gypsum into the water that eventually reaches our faucets. And voters turned the key for a constitutional amendment to help fight coastal erosion. Maybe there is hope.
Well, in a moment, we'll see where some hopes and prayers were answered as our 80s farewell continues.
His name is George Jones, and when he sings, he touches your heart. I work for... And now he sings the songs that inspired America through the tough times. Songs of faith we lived and worked by.
Or I'm a small-time laboring.
For the first time on television, George Jones' 24 Gospel Greats, a beautiful album of inspirational songs sung as only George Jones could sing them.
I can see us sitting around the table when from the family Bible and the tree. Old brush arbors by the side of the road where a sinner could lay down his heavy load. Will there be any stars in my crown? Flowers for Mama, I picked them today.
These are songs that drew family and friends together. It's music that will touch your heart and lift your spirits.
Oh, they tell me on a cloudy day. No, I can't forget the hour.
This could be the most beautiful album you've ever owned. George Jones 24 Gospel Greats. Available now on 2 LPs, 8-track, double play cassette, or compact disc. Please order now.
To order COD or credit card, call toll-free 1-800-441-4848. That's 1-800-441-4848. Or save COD and handling charges by sending $12.98 for 2 LPs, 1 8-track, 1 long-playing cassette, or 1 compact disc to George Jones Gospel, P.O. Box 8510, Nashville, Tennessee.